With a huge round of applause, let's commence with the first session of the Bangalore Business Literature Festival, the 10th edition. And as you can see, we have two eminent scholars joining us for this very first session. Let me take the pleasure of inviting and introducing none other than Mr. Shankar P. A huge round of applause for the host for this first session, Mr. Shankar P., who is a writer, editor at Knowledge Wharton. Please to join us here on the dais, sir. I would also like to invite none other than the main guest for the first session. With a huge round of applause, everyone, Mr. Harish Bhat joining us right here on the dais. And yes, it's time for the audience to witness a conversation between these two eminent scholars who will be discussing on secrets of success in career and writing. I would also request our host to also provide a brief introduction of Mr. Harish Bhatt and commence with the session. Over to you, sir.
Much for coming. Uh, this Harish Bhat, whom we are going to speak with this morning, is a man of, he wears many hats, so to speak. He's a corporate executive. He's been a Tata Group executive for many years, and he is now an advisor and a director on many Tata Group companies. He's also an advisor to Tata Sons, right, which is the holding company, and that must be a very fascinating job. He's also an avid author. He's written 7 books. His latest book on Jamshedji Tata is just out. 3 of his books are bestsellers, and he calls himself an avid marketer. So, among his feathers there are having created or nurtured brands like Starbucks, Tanishq, Titan, and these are all brands that we all have. We touch and feel these brands every other, not every other day, but every other year at least. And is also a popular, sought after, I believe, speaker and corporate leader. Uh, I'm sure I'm missing out some of your other roles. He's also a poet. I read somewhere in his, his LinkedIn profile is so fascinating. We can go on and on, but we have limited time, so I'm going to dive straight into the questions. We're going to start talking, for the most part, about his latest, one of his newest books, which is Office Secrets, where he talks about 50, he shares 50 ideas that can help you make work in the office more productive, more happy, as he said, and also more rewarding. Now, those 50 ideas include things like how you can be generous with your colleagues, how you can be very participative with ideas, you can be a good listener. He has some revolutionary ideas like you should daydream. So I'm going to ask him to talk about some of his favorite office secrets.
So thank you, Shankar, for those very warm words of introduction. And like Shankar said, most of this dialogue I am going to keep to this book, Office Secrets, which I published a year ago. Uh, None of these secrets are, about strategies and finance and all the serious things in offices. I wrote this book because I think we should take our work very seriously, but we should not take ourselves very seriously. So let me talk about 2 or 3 of these, Shankar, within the limited time that we have. I'm actually going to, it's a early morning, and I'm going to talk about one of the more humorous episodes from this book. So I've been working in corporates for 37 years now, working with the Tata Group. And all of you who have worked in corporates, worked in offices, uh, have you ever sat in a meeting where a tray of biscuits or a plate of biscuits has come in front of you? How many of you have? I think all hands up. So so I've been observing how people respond when plates of biscuits come in front of us on the meeting room. And I think that observation throws up a lot of insights about people. You know, you have a person, for instance, the moment the plate of biscuit comes, he or she will grab the biscuit that they like before anyone else takes it. So I call such a person the grabber, but I also say that it's a good philosophy to have. You know, Ayn Rand has told us that selfishness is the best virtue. So he has full clarity on what he wants in life, will not waste any time in getting it. But close behind is the vacillator. The vacillator does not know which biscuit to select. He loves them all, so he has to take up a little bit of time making up his mind. Not a very good person to have in the corporate world, because you know he'll keep for forever living a life of constant regret. Then we have a health critic, someone like me, always looking at how many calories, what cholesterol, which is the healthiest biscuit to pick up, maybe eating bits of the cookie, not even eating it fully, leaving part of the cookie back on the plate. So that's the third observation I have, and this is you know, his life is a constant struggle in our society. Then you have the picky eater. The picky eater will actually sometimes eat only the cream from the cream biscuit and leave the rest of it behind, because they only want the best parts of what is served to them. But this man is typically will tend to do that throughout his life. You have the civilized sacrificer. She may actually say, let me wait till another colleague picks up the biscuit and then I will take whatever is left over on the plate. I've also come across, you know, another classification which I put here, which is the carry bag. You know, there are conferences that we have in hotels and other places. Biscuits are served. At the end of the meeting, if they're left behind, the person says, oh, my company has anyway paid for this, let me take them home. So these are some of the classifications of observing people. And that person is a wonderful negotiator to have with you, because they believe that we should take everything back with us. So, you know, even an observation of how cookies are served in offices can lead to various insights about people, which is what I have said first here. But on a more serious note, Shankar, you talk about generosity.
Yeah, I thought that was
Yeah.
fascinating.
And I think generosity is one of those traits which is not practiced enough in offices. And I must narrate a story here. You know, in 2012, when I decided to write my first book, I had no clue how to write a book. You know, I was a marketer. I used to work in Titan here in Bangalore in those days, and I had to write a book. So I wrote an email to the Tata Group headquarters. I wrote an email to a gentleman called R. Gopalakrishnan, who featured in this video, by the way. I think he spoke at an earlier edition. He was already a director of Tata Sons. I was a manager in Titan. I didn't even think I would get a response from him. I wrote a letter to him saying, can you guide me on how to write a book? I'm very keen to write a book on the Tata Group. In 2 days, I get a response from him saying, I'm happy to help you. Please come across to my office in Bombay and meet me. We'll spend some time together. So I go across thinking maybe he will give me 15 minutes, 20 minutes. He was in the boards of several companies. He's a director of our parent company, Tata Sons. I go to Bombay. He says, Harish, wait. I want to discuss this thoroughly with you. And he gives me an hour and a half of his time to discuss how to write a book, what to write, what stories to select. He gives me some tips, because by then he had written 2 or 3 books of his own at that point in time. So I said, fine, this is wonderful that a person is taking out so much time at his seniority to help me to do this. And then I come back and I start writing the book. Part of the book I write at the Tata Management Training Center in Pune. And then one weekend, Mr. Gopalakrishnan lands up there as part of his review of the institute there. And then he says, I'm going to spend the next 3 or 4 hours with you discussing how your writing is coming along and what you need to improve and what you need to do. And he spends all that time with me reviewing my book and giving me tips on how I could do it better. And finally, he also agrees to write a foreword to that book. That was my first book, Tata Load, which is given here. That book is now in its 25th reprint and has become a national bestseller. But I owe a lot of it. But I owe a lot of it to Mr. Gopalakrishnan. And I'm very happy to say that, you know, the latest book I published on Jamshedji Tata has actually been co-authored with him. He invited me to co-author the book with him. So the wheel has come a full circle there. Generosity is very important, Shankar. Generosity is not only about money. It's about listening. It's about sharing your knowledge with people, particularly with junior people who are looking to you to learn as they move forward. Generosity is about giving. You always want a lot of things, but how much do you give to people? And sometimes give to people even without expecting anything in return. Generosity is about sometimes doing unexpected things. to surprise your colleague in the office. Um, Generosity is being gracious to people, regardless of whether they are strangers, or peers, or juniors. It's very easy to be super nice to our bosses. All of us, many, many people are super nice to their bosses. But how many people are actually super nice to the people who work with us and people who are far junior to us in our organizations? And as I write about in this book, generosity doesn't mean compromising the quality of work. I think we have to be very tough on the quality of work. You've been an editor of some of the finest newspapers in our land, and you would be very tough on the quality of work, I'm sure. But generosity is about motivating people, about giving them time, at the same time, about staying very true to the quality of work that is required. So, those are just two examples from this book, Shankar. Of course, I write about daydreaming. That's the other thing. The third idea that I'll quickly summarize and come to a conclusion on. Scientists have studied the lives of all of us, and they found that we spend 45% of our time daydreaming, the average person. And most people, our teachers in school, have told us daydreaming is a bad thing. Don't look out of the window, look at the blackboard and see what is happening here. But actually, daydreaming is a very good thing to do if it's done in moderation. And I write about why it is good to do. I write about how daydreaming can help us beat the blues, because you think about the things which are happy in your life. You think about the things which you want to do, which are, and it can take you away from stress induced anxieties in your life. Daydreaming is very good for solving difficult problems. Sometimes your mind is full of thoughts, you're not able to solve a particular problem, but if you let your mind wander into daydreaming, sometimes all those thoughts come together unexpectedly and create the solution in your mind, which is why many people say they get their solutions when they're in the shower and not when they're sitting in a conference room. Daydreaming is very good to work towards a goal in life, and I explain why in this book. And of course, daydreaming is sheer pleasure. It takes you away from all the anxieties and stresses of day to day life. So I think all of us in the corporate world also should look at a little bit of daydreaming and not be worried if we lapse into occasions of daydreaming. That's what I have found. That's what my colleagues tell me. And that's one of the secrets that So I've talked about three things here when we started with. I've talked about cookies, I've talked about daydreaming, I've talked about generosity, and within this book you will find 50 such secrets of office life. These are the kind of secrets I'm talking about, not secrets of strategy or some financial brilliance, all of which is required, but these human secrets are equally required in our daily lives.
So much. That's very insightful. I thought the dreaming part particularly was very interesting because uh, my wife was telling me last week about who's the guy who discovered quickly
Yeah, yeah,
benzene.
that's right, that's right.
He dreamt that
Yeah, he thought that he dreamt of a snake eating its own head or tail. And that dream of a snake eating its own tail gave him the ring structure of benzene. I remember that. That's the
yeah,
dream which
fascinating.
came to him.
And Srinivas Ramanujan, he got
Yes.
many of his, at least some of his uh, problems solved in his dreams, right?
Yes.
So I don't know why organizations don't value employees who sleep, because if you have to dream, you have to sleep a bit, right?
Yeah, you sometimes
Anyway,
close your eyes, you sometimes dream with your eyes wide open. Uh, there is another chapter here which I have written about how people attend meetings. And one of the categories of people who attend meetings are people who sleep in meetings. But the point is they may be sleeping, but the moment something of significance is said, they will wake
they
up
wake
and say
up
something.
because
So
they're
it
deep
shows
in
that
thought.
they're not really sleeping. Their mind is somewhere in what is happening, even though their eyes are closed. Have you noticed that sometimes?
I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
So anyway, talking about your career as a writer, we're going to be focusing on the second part of it, or both the parts actually, his success in his career and in writing. Now,
Shankar is asking for the mic.
as a writer,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a lot of stories that you could, tips that you could share with people here, some of whom are aspiring writers, some of
Yeah.
us
So
established writers. How do you write? I mean, do you need a separate room? You go up to the hill somewhere, or you work with a lot of noise? What do you get writer's blocks?
yeah.
And how do you succeed actually? I mean, what is success in writing?
I don't think I've ever had a separate room where I sit and write. My first book was written on our dining table. I still sit a lot on our dining table and write in our living room. I sometimes sit on a table in our bedroom. Um, I have sat in office and written. So there's no specific place. But one of the things, Shankar, I'd like to say is many people wait for inspiration to strike you before you sit and write. If you do that, I think you may wait for your whole life or you may wait for several years because the muse may never really come at the time that you want her to come or to come into your life. feel, I feel that one of the greatest things you can do if you want to write is put some discipline to the writing. All of us have a story within us, the story of our own lives, things we have observed. But I think putting discipline to that, I early on in my writing voyage, I discovered was very important. And I was in a full-time job with the Tata Group. I used to be the chief operating officer of Titan, then the CEO of Tata Global Beverages, and then the brand custodian at Tata Sons. Monday to Friday, I would not get any time to write because the time would go completely in my office work. But one of the things I did, Shankar, was every Sunday morning. There was a time in my 30s when I used to take Sundays to play cricket for the Tata T team. But I gave up playing cricket in my 40s and 50s. And every Sunday morning I would sit down and write. And I would not get up from my laptop computer until I had written about 1,000 words. Now, that is difficult. It took me time to cultivate that discipline, but I think that has been at the heart of one of the reasons why I have been able to author 7 books over the last 10 or 11 years. So, one of my first tips to any aspiring writer is don't worry what you're writing about. Sit down and write. Sit down and write about your own thoughts, write about your own history, write about the things which matter to you greatly. But unless you sit down and make time to write, you're never going to pursue your aspiration of writing. The second thing I would say is don't aim for perfection in your writing. Write spontaneously. Write spontaneously. You can always correct your draft later. You can always make a second or a third draft later. You're not running against a columnist's timeline, which is to submit by tonight. So take your time, write spontaneously, let it flow on paper, and you can then correct it as you go along. The third thing I would say is I think one of the, if you are wanting to start to write, write about the things that mean the most to you. Write about, if you're a marketer and you love marketing, write about marketing. If you're an observer of human beings, write about human beings. If you love food, write about food. If you love art and culture, write about art and culture. So whatever is the subject that most interests you, start with writing in that particular domain. Don't wait to discover a domain for the future. By the time you're 20 years, 25 years, there are a few things that interest you in life, and you should choose one or two of those things to write about. That's what I would say. And the last thing I would say, if you're an aspiring writer, would be read. Read good books by others. Because when you read good books in your genre. If you want to write about food, read books by people who have written about food. If you want to write about economics, read books about people who have written about economics. Once you read good books, it really opens your mind to what good writers are, the way their language flows, the way the way the entire ideas flow through the book or through the writings or through the columns. Uh, so a writer, according to me, the best window to the world is really reading other people's books as well. And over time, you will evolve your own style. But out of all these, if you push me to the wall and ask me one thing which has helped me with my writing, it has been discipline. It has been that every week I go and sit down somewhere, I get restless, but I make sure I write those 1,000 words a week. And if you write 1,000 words a week, then you are writing 52,000 words a year, which is really the size of an entire book. So, that's not, it's a very mathematical formula which works out by itself.
मिया
That's
where
all
to
you need to give yourself
courier
permission
delivery
to
देने
sit down.
मम्मी को
क्रिकेट बॉल की डिलीवरी नहीं मिया जो खुद से करेगा
Reminded of a bit of advice that one of my former editors from Time Magazine, Josh Taylor, gave me. He said, "If you want to, I'm a business writer. He said, if you want to be a good writer, read poetry." And it seems so counterintuitive. Why would you read poetry?
Why did he say that?
He said poetry is what allows you to think beyond outside the box. You can do all those things in poetry that you cannot do in real life. It really is the ultimate freedom. For instance, you can hang your hopes on a hook. You cannot do that in real life, right? So poetry is
Yes.
kind of very liberating. It can.
Very interesting point of view. It has not struck me so far. Very interesting point of view that reading poetry encourages you
Mia,
to write
where to?
imaginatively.
Cur-
Yeah, very interesting point.
So anyway, the other part of your
Mia,
career as a
where to?
marketer is also very fascinating. Because these big brands that we all aspire for, most of us, we can't go every day to Tanishq or Titan or even a Starbucks. How do you get people to buy all these things? To sell
So I
marketing.
think selling stuff is incredibly
It's so
challenging,
hard.
but incredibly
I cannot
interesting.
sell an idea to my wife or our son.
No. I think
You sell
selling
it to.
something to my wife or daughter is the most difficult.
No.
That I don't think I've succeeded yet.
Huh.
That does not require marketing skills. It requires skills in a different domain altogether.
Okay.
But it's an interesting question. I began my career trying to sell tea and coffee. We were a small tea company called Tata Tea.
PM, sorry.
Yeah, tea. So I started, and it is incredibly difficult to convince people why one brand of tea is different or superior to another brand of tea. I then went into selling jewelry, marketing jewelry, and then went into marketing wristwatches, and eventually I was marketing a corporate brand, which is the Tata brand, or the custodian of the Tata brand. I feel if you're a marketer, one of the best things that works, Shankar, is really observing people. Observing, one of my books is called The Curious Marketer. It's based completely on observation of events, of people, of places, of things, of books, etc. Because what is marketing? Marketing is the art of conveying to people. Firstly, marketing is the art of devising a good product or a good service. It is the art of pricing it well, pricing it at good value. And after that, you have to convince people that your product or service is superior to another competing product or
Mia,
service in the
where
same
to?
category,
Courier
or in
delivery
another
dinner?
category also. To
So
do
sorry to interrupt. We are running short on time. I request our guests to kindly keep the
so,
conversation short.
yeah. So I will just
Yeah, one
conclude
more
by
question.
saying, that if you observe people and you understand human psychology, then you are able to market effectively to people. That's the answer I'd like to give.
And thanks so much. That last part you talked about watching people, paying attention. And that is a tale that Kishore Biyani, another big marketer, also likes to talk about. He used to stand outside malls and just watch people for hours,
Yeah.
looking at what they buy and what they don't buy.
Totally.
Then
Yeah.
it would be a shame not to talk to him about his career at the Tatas, especially his role as brand custodian. Uh, he was in charge of ensuring that the Tata brand
I
holds. And
request, so sorry to interrupt. I request the guests to keep it short. We are
can we
running.
get him to talk for just 1 minute?
Please do conclude within few minutes.
Okay, we will talk about it maybe offline.
Yeah, we can do that offline.
But thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Thank
and
you for a
thanks
very,
everybody.
very interesting conversation. Thanks a lot.
I would like who has joined us for the very first session, The Secrets of Success in Career and Writing. And the best learning that we can get away from this specific session would be nothing else but, as Mr. Harish Bhat has conveyed and emphasized, it is nothing but discipline. And thank you so much for this insightful conversation. Can we have a huge round of applause once again for the two gentlemen over here? Presenting a token of our appreciation for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us in this exchange of knowledge. Much, Sudhakar sir, for presenting a token of our appreciation for both our host as well as the speaker for the very first session of the Bangalore Business Literature Fest. Can we have you please posing for a photograph?